this, I'll say just from a personal level, is that you don't really realize when you age. So what I mean by that is, there's a difference in mindset when you're a teenager playing basketball or baseball and you're working out like 4 hours a day. And not even saying that they need the protein or they need anything else. I'm sure they can get that from a plant-based diet, as your vegan athlete would attest. But I just mean in general, you do all these things, but you're really maximizing and burning that off because you're at a different stage, also potentially hormonally, as growing up. But that being said, then you get a little bit older, and you keep those same eating habits that may no longer be serving you. So you're eating all this protein and things because you think you need this protein, but guess what? You don't work out 4 hours a day now. Now you're at a desk for 12 hours a day staring at a computer screen with the same diet what you had when you were 16.
Hey friends, this is Trent Lindsey and welcome to episode 2 of the Plant-Based Diet Benefit Podcast. You just listened to my good friend Adam Torres dropping a little bit of wisdom during this interview that I am so excited for you guys to hear more about. We decided to mix things up a little bit and flip roles between me and Adam. And instead of me doing my usual thing of interviewing others on their journey to a plant-based diet, he has been gracious enough to interview me on my journey. So this should be a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoy the episode. Let's get started. All right. Hey, friends, this is Trent Lindsey back with you here, and I am super excited about today's episode because I have a good friend of mine, Adam Torres, who is going to be chatting with us today and play a little bit of a role reversal, and he's going to be interviewing me on my journey to a plant-based diet, and I'm super excited. Like I said, he's a dear friend of mine, and he's seen me before going vegan and after going vegan as well, so should serve as an interesting conversation. So Adam, thank you very much for joining me on the show today.
Yeah, and really, Trent, the honor is all mine. For the listeners, I have to tell you a funny story. So Trent is the guy that we've known each other for over a decade now, and I still, he's the guy that I send the random text to about the randomest dietary questions. Yet my last one to him was like, I want to eat like the Jetsons. How do I just take a pill? Or how do I just, and Trent placates. He has patience. He's an excellent teacher. And let me tell you, all of you are lucky that he is putting his time into this because everything he does comes out great. So I'm really pumped to listen to his podcast and also participate in this interview today. So all great stuff, Trent.
Yes, absolutely. And I know we've had a lot of fun chatting about that. Of course, we are all busy. I think anybody who's listening to this is busy. We're always trying to find ways to eat a little bit quicker, but still get all the nutrition that we have. So maybe we'll get there for you, Adam. Have you eat like the Jetsons? But
all good. Thank you. Make that happen. But let's start the interview. You ready?
All right, let's do it.
All right, great. So these are just a couple of questions that, I think are super interesting, and maybe you haven't had a chance to share in your podcast yet. So let's just start out with a little bit more about your path on how you went vegan and why. So let's start with just your dietary background. What kind of foods, a lot of us learn our habits when we're growing up. So let's just start with what kind of foods were you raised on?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I was a kid, and I didn't turn vegan until I was in my 30s. But when I was being raised, I was raised in a family where we ate a lot of poultry products, chicken and eggs and things like that. So my dad's side of the business has been in the chicken industry for generations. So it's something that they've done for a very long time, where they sell poultry, like the chicken and eggs, over to restaurants and other grocery stores and things like that. So my dad, both of my brothers work in that industry, and it was very easy for somebody like myself for them to have pretty much unlimited supply of chicken. So we ate a lot of chicken growing up in all different forms.
So what is kind of like the the transition? So the transition point from you, because obviously many of the people listening, they chickens, that's considered the go-to a lot of times. So we're taught, let's just say that if the things that we want to avoid are maybe the more fatty, types of beef, or things that are supposedly going to, clog our heart or our arteries, that kind of thing. And you're raised in a pretty healthy, chicken diet. So what kind of sparks that change in your thought process?
Yeah, so it was actually in my early 30s when it all started, actually, when I had a family member of mine complete a half marathon. And I always considered maybe myself as being a little bit more athletic than that person, but like there's no way I can envision myself running a half marathon. Like I wasn't really actively working out or running or anything like that. So I got really inspired by that. And the next day I went out to the closest hiking trail next to my house and pretty much overdid it. And long story short, I hurt my knee coming down this mountain. And at that point, I kind of realized I wasn't necessarily in the best shape, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was probably in better shape than me in terms of being able to physically do something like that. And that kind of sparked my journey. I ended up going to physical therapy for a period of months and had a lot of conversations. I don't know if you've ever been to physical therapy, but you seem to build a really good connection with the people who are working with you there. And I have a lot of conversations while you're going through that. And so I started talking to him a little bit about a house we were going to buy and how we try to eat, as many like whole foods as we could at the time. Our approach to diet at the time was if it had a mommy or a daddy, then it was okay to eat. So we didn't really eat any processed foods, but we still ate anything that came from the earth or from another animal. And so he started recommending that I do a garden and at my new house. So I started researching into that. And that's kind of what led to my path, or led me down this path to veganism, was because of the people I was learning from who are doing gardening on YouTube. And
I remember that too, when you started your first garden. That was a while ago. No, I remember that. And you're right. So it was a pretty gradual transition. So when you started your first garden, you weren't vegan yet, right?
No, well, technically, I think by that time I was. When I was researching and trying to learn how to grow a garden, we were in the process of purchasing our first house, but we hadn't actually started the garden yet. And one of the guys I was learning from online was Jake Mace. He goes by the Vegan Athlete right now on YouTube. And he's actually guest on this podcast, episode number 3. And he posted a video about the top 10 reasons why he was vegan. And like the whole time I was watching him on YouTube, I never really made the connection. The Vegan Athlete was the name of his YouTube channel. Like I just skipped right over the vegan part, I guess, every single time I looked at it. And I'm like, wait a minute, what?
So when you're out there naming your brands, be specific, because obviously the Vegan Athlete was not specific enough.
Oh no, it's like
maybe it could have been the vegan athlete. That would have caught you.
Yeah, all I knew is that this guy was very fit. He does martial arts, and he
awesome.
he grew a lot of food from his garden. And I'm like, man, that seems to be working out well for him, And so he had that video, top 10 reasons why I'm vegan. And after I watched it, I'm a very logical person. So like if I can't come up with a logical explanation as to like why I shouldn't agree with somebody, then it really sinks in, and I have a hard time going against it. And his reasons why he was vegan just made a lot of sense to me. And so shortly after that, I talked to my wife Mary about trying it out for 30 days, and the rest is history. After that 30 days, we were hooked.
So let's talk a little bit more about that, because I know there's some listeners that are tuning in, and maybe some of them are listening for the first time. Maybe some of them have been following you for a while, but we can't skip over that transition, because the transition in anything, I mean, a new job, a new career, a new sport you're learning, I mean, that transition is where the growing pains are. So let's stick with that a little bit more. Can you elaborate on what the transition was like?
Absolutely. So there was a lot of uncertainty. That much I definitely remember because I was just so curious about.
What a champion Mary is, by the way. I can't imagine. I'm not married, obviously, but if I was, and I just tell my wife, "Hey, can we go vegan for a month? Let's just do it." Like Mary's awesome.
Yeah,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
She is great. Anybody knows her knows that she's awesome.
Mhm.
And yeah, so I talked to her. We actually went out to dinner. We had a date night, and I talked to her
Mhm.
about this video and gave her some maybe 5 of the reasons that I could remember. And it was in December before the holidays still, and I was like, let's just maybe get through the holidays, not stir anything up, with the family traditions
Mhm.
for December. And then I found a book actually that's out there called the 30-Day Vegan Challenge, where it gives you 30 days worth of reading. You could every day you're supposed to read one kind of chapter or page in this book that would slowly educate you on how to transition to a plant-based diet. But we did it, just 100% transition. So on day one, we stopped eating anything from animal products, which for me and Mary, that worked for us. We are the type of people that can make that type of switch, but that's not necessarily always the best route to go. I know a lot of people need to more slowly transition into it, and that's actually what I recommend most people do is just by starting out with replacing their breakfast with a plant-based breakfast, and then after they do that, then maybe try to replace their lunch, and then a few dinners, and just kind of slowly transition it over. But for if you kind of have the same perspective as I do, then you could of course just make the switch all at once too. But having a book like that, or having Facebook groups that you could belong to where you could ask questions, that kind of stuff is really important. I didn't know of all the Facebook groups at the time that are available to you, but having the book kind of really helped me on my transition and answer some of the simple questions like where do you get your protein from, where are you going to get calcium from, little things like that.
Mm. And so it sounds like, let's comment on that a little bit more. So I think in a lot of things that you do, whether it's a sport, whether it's something else, I'll give you an example. Peloton. I know when I had a Peloton, they have this crazy Facebook group that's the community around it really, really supports new members and people that are coming on board with the idea of getting fit and just cycling. So can you talk a little bit more about the community surrounding, what you're doing and the benefit of being vegan?
Absolutely. So for the most part, the community is very supportive. Of course, you can go out and join the plant-based diet benefits community out on Facebook. I'll provide a link in the show notes, or you can just go to www.plantbaseddietbenefits.com/community. So hopefully we become a really good pillar of how to treat people who are wanting to transition into a vegan diet, because usually you have a lot of questions and it's important for you to be supported. I know there are plenty of Facebook groups out there. I won't name them all. The one thing I would say is that they can be a little bit narrow-sighted at times. So if you think about the different types of vegan diets that people like to follow, there's various doctors that promote an approach to a vegan diet, like Dr. McDougall or Dr. Greger. Sometimes people in those groups can not be open to anything other than what that doctor is recommending, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, no, that makes sense. So the whole idea is to be a little bit more, I guess we'll say open sourced, right? So it's just something a little bit more open. I get it.
Yeah, and one of the things that I kind of recommend is that you don't necessarily have to go vegan all at once again. So I'm willing to help out anybody who's wanting just to transition and make the decision to incorporate more plants into their diet. And that's what my group is all about. It's
Yeah, and I mean that's what I come to you for, just to be straightforward. I mean, for clear disclosure to the listeners, I mean, I told Trent, quite frankly, I'm looking to incorporate more vegan meals into my diet. I'm not 100% vegan, but I've been around many vegan people in my life. I mean, from girlfriends, all kinds of things, and I understand some of the benefits and my transition, which I don't know if it'll ever be 100%, but I can tell you that the percentage of my vegan meals have been increasing through the years, and that's from help from people like Trent. So I get that, and I appreciate that. So I just thought that little bit of disclosure for the listeners. So what kind of let's just start. So now we got a little bit more of your history. We know a little bit more of your transition period of how you got to where you're at. What kind of benefits do you feel the plant-based diet has given you?
Yeah, so one of the first benefits I felt was from a digestion perspective. Before going vegan, I had been diagnosed with like irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS, which is kind of like a catch-all type of diagnosis, if that's the right word. But just my digestion wasn't necessarily that great, and it was probably eating too many chicken wings and having too much beer, to be honest with you. But after getting a lot more fiber into your diet, which is, I think, something that most people on a standard American or standard Western diet don't get enough of, it really starts to help, kind of push things through your digestion a lot easier. So that was by far the first benefit that I experienced on a plant-based diet. I started getting a lot more energy as well. And I think as you continue to eat on a plant-based diet, you figure out what works best for you as well, because everybody's a little bit different. There's a concept out there called bio-individuality, where you kind of have to learn and adjust your diet to see what best suits you. And so for me, like the more smoothies and juices and things like that I can consume, the better I feel. But that's not always possible. In my family with 3 kids, we have to have a lot of kid-friendly meals, so I don't always get that. But whenever I do have that kind of optimal diet, definitely full of energy. And then, of course, there's the blood work side of things. So a lot of people pay attention to things like, the amount of energy that they have, or like their weight loss and stuff like that. I've lost weight on a vegan diet, and I've gained weight on a vegan diet. But one thing that I know has always been consistent is that my blood work has come back really great in terms of what my cholesterol numbers are, blood pressure, all those type of statistics, number of triglycerides in my blood and all that kind of stuff has greatly improved since being on a vegan diet. And that's where the proof is for me.
So can you let's stay there for a minute. I don't know if you covered that in a previous episode, but I just don't want to assume that everybody knows the terms that you just said. So meaning, for example, I'm not educated on what blood work means and how it helps, or how you're even using these stats. If you were to tell me, oh, I have good blood work, that means nothing to me. So can we stay there for a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say one of the key things that, and this isn't even one I mentioned, but like the amount of blood glucose, for example, that you have in your blood is how you determine if you have diabetes or not, which is like one of the leading diseases now in America, right? So there's a blood test that you can take that measures how much HA1C, I believe is what it's called. And that basically tells you how much blood is in, or how much glucose is in your blood. And it measures it. This particular test kind of gives you like a rolling 2 to 4 month time period. So it's not like a point in time type of test.
Got it.
It's a lot more accurate. And
how often do you recommend that somebody do that then? Just to be curious, I'm just curious to get blood work done.
Yeah, so I do it once a year.
Okay.
That's something that I do. It's actually
that's maintainable. That's maintainable. That's something that anybody can do. It's once a year.
Yeah, and then of course, if you have issues though, right? With
Mm-hmm.
your HA1C, like your blood glucose levels. And if you are pre-diabetic or diabetic, then I think you're probably going to get it tested, every 3 or 6 months instead.
Got it.
But yeah, if you're healthy, not really having any issues on your blood work, then I would say every year is perfectly fine. But that's one thing that the society as at large is really afraid of carbohydrates because carbohydrates.
I'm not afraid of
turn into
French
sugar.
fries. I love French fries. In-N-Out burger, come on. I'll take those French fries all day long, extra crispy. I'm not afraid. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, that's all right. But I mean, most people are afraid of just like an apple or an orange and, like whole fruits because it's mainly carbohydrates. But there are plenty of vegans out there.
Where does that fear come from, though? Because I agree with you. I've seen it and I've heard it. Is that and this is actually a serious question, even though the way I'm going to say it may sound funny, but is it just because they haven't marketed like the beef company? Like beef, it's what's for dinner, or like the chicken companies, or because the actual, and I mean industries like USDA meat, this and that, they market really hard to consumers in terms of pushing meat overall as a food. So where does that fear, do you think, come from about being scared of an apple?
I think there's a couple of different reasons. So first, the simple fact is that carbohydrates are a sugar. Like they digest directly into sugar. So if somebody has high glucose or sugar levels in their blood, they kind of make that direct connections that if I eat more carbohydrates, I'm going to have more sugar in my blood, which is causing my diabetes. Therefore, I shouldn't eat as much carbohydrates. And that's pretty much why anybody with diabetes goes to their doctor and they say, cut out the carbohydrates in your diet. But that's not actually the root cause of diabetes. The root cause of diabetes, and at least type 2 diabetes, I should say, is the insulin inside of your blood isn't properly able to escort the glucose into your body's cells. Okay. And I don't want to go too much in detail there. I'm sure I'll have a whole episode on that later.
Sure, of course.
But it's actually the fat content in your cells, the amount of fat you have in your muscle cells, that is the root cause of diabetes.
So it's not the apple.
No, it's not the apple at all. And the carbohydrates are good.
It's not like this person's eating an apple a day and all of a sudden the apple caused diabetes. So a lot of it's maybe miseducation.
Yeah, that, and then, back with what you were saying, that second main reason is the marketing. If you look at,
I knew it.
And this even goes on vegan products too, unfortunately. Like, it's just the way the marketing works, right? People are very focused because of decades of marketing on getting enough protein in their diet. And so even on some vegan like sausages, like if you look at a field roast sausage or tofurkey sausage, like every single sausage you see out there has at least 20 grams of protein per serving, which is a lot of protein. Most people only need like 45 to 55 grams of protein in a whole day. So getting 20 of that from just one sausage is quite a bit. And so I think the marketing is really like built up this desire or need for protein, which they've marketed as, you need your animal products in order to get the protein, which isn't necessarily, it's obviously an option, right? But you can get plenty of protein on a plant-based diet. And I think most people that ask that question, like how am I going to get enough protein on a plant-based diet? They need to first, I think, figure out how much protein they actually need. And I think most people would be really surprised at how low that number is.
Well, yeah, and also because I feel like, and this I'll say just from a personal level, is that you don't really realize when you age. So what I mean by that is, there's a difference in mindset when you're a teenager playing basketball or baseball and you're working out like 4 hours a day. And not even saying that they need the protein or they need anything else. I'm sure they can get that from a plant-based diet, as your vegan athlete would attest. But I just mean in general, you do all these things, but you're really maximizing and burning that off because you're at a different stage, also potentially hormonally, in what as growing up. But that being said, then you get a little bit older, and you keep those same eating habits that may no longer be serving you. So you're eating all this protein and things because you think you need this protein, but guess what? You don't work out 4 hours a day now. Now you're at a desk for 12 hours a day staring at a computer screen with the same diet what you had when you were 16.
Yeah, exactly. And the other part, there's three sources of calories, right? There's carbohydrates, proteins, and then fats. And one of the things that I think a lot of people overlook when they look at, high protein animal sources of food, right, like a chicken or beef or anything like that, is that if there is no carbohydrates in there, then it's protein and fat, right? So if there's, say, 30% or 40% of the calories are coming from protein, well, the rest of it is, 50+% is coming from fat. And most people, I think, would agree that if you continue to eat a lot of fat in your diet, that's going to lead to more fat in your body. But, from a marketing perspective, like, nobody's ever going to say that, right? Like, it's high protein and high fat. They don't market it that way. It's more like it's high protein and low carb.
Yeah, you are completely correct. So the ratio just gets completely overlooked for most people.
Yeah, exactly.
So what we've gone through a lot here. What would you say is some of the best advice you could give to your listeners right now on how they should approach the idea of either becoming vegan or continuing to transition on that path?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that helped me, and I think it helps a lot of other people as well, is becoming educated on some of the questions that we've even talked about already, right? Like the initial questions that you have, like how do you get enough protein? How do you get enough calcium? Where am I going to get X, YZ type of mineral? Educating yourself is really important. And whether that's you doing the research yourself or by joining, some of these groups out there that you can pose the questions to, I think that's the best place to start. So that way you can feel confident in the decision that you're making. And then I think not trying to mimic what a lot of people out there are doing on like YouTube and stuff like that. So there's a lot of YouTube videos out there. They'll be like, what I ate in a day videos for a plant-based diet. And the people that are making those videos have probably been vegan for, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And they've really had a lot of experience in terms of transitioning their diet over to what it is now. Like what it is now isn't necessarily what it was when they first transitioned. And a lot of people, I think, forget about that. So I would say, make things as simple as possible and write down like what your favorite meals are that have animal products in them. And then just try to veganize those favorite meals that you have, as opposed to trying like out all these recipes that maybe are too complex or that different flavors that you're not used to.
I think that's a really good transition, because next where I wanted to take this was to get into the nuts and bolts a little. So if you can remember, what are some of the first, obviously don't give a whole recipe, but just so that, listeners have a little bit more context to what you just said. So basically try and veganize some of the food that you already eat so that it's easier for you to do so. So what are some of the first meals that you can remember veganizing?
Yeah. So before we went vegan, like a very big staple in our house was a meat of some sort, along with a starch and a vegetable. Like that's what our plate looked like. I think like 3 different food groups, rice, vegetables, and then a piece of chicken or a piece of fish. So the very first thing that we did was just, cut out the butter, because we would always put butter in our rice and vegetables and stuff like that. So we just started using olive oil instead. And then we just substituted out the chicken or fish with tofu. We tried tempeh a
Mm.
couple of times, but our family wasn't really a big fan of tempeh. But a lot of people really love tempeh. But we just started using tofu instead. So, that first month, like we had so much tofu because anytime we were going to have chicken, we used tofu, and we were trying to look online at all these different ways to make tofu taste like chicken, which is like not possible. Tofu tastes like tofu.
I was just gonna say that does not sound appetizing. So that being said, okay, how did you get past that step? Because at this point, in my opinion, somebody might give up. They're like, I'm tired of this tofu. Like, so what was the next step, would you say? Like, how did you, obviously, and I'm going to just say this out loud, that was probably a big speed bump for you to get over. So if you wanted to remove that speed bump, then what would you do now again if you could do it over again?
Yeah. So obviously I endured it, but I didn't really have to deal with it for too long, because then we started getting some cookbooks. And we probably have 20 to 30 plant-based cookbooks. And we just started going through those, and we were always big fans of cookbooks anyways. We recently moved and had to get rid of, I think, like probably another 40 cookbooks that had a lot of animal products and stuff in it. We gave those away to other people. And but we just started buying a lot of cookbooks and started experimenting with some of the recipes. But again, I would try to veganize your meals first to kind of ease into it, but then just go out there and have fun and try to use some new recipes and test out what you think you like, and as you go, you'll find out ingredients that maybe you aren't as fond of. Like I said, my family's not a big fan of tempeh, but other people really love it. So you kind of just learn by doing.
I'd say it sounds a whole lot more fun to try to get a cookbook and go through that, because I want no part of trying to make tofu or anything else taste good. I'm like, let me just have a really good. And I've seen some of the stuff you post on your Instagram account, plant-based diet. Like I love that stuff. I'm like, oh man, this guy, he's like making the stuff look good. And I'm like, oh, I wish I still lived in Arizona, because then I just come over. Like, what's for dinner, Trent?
Exactly. And just to be clear though, like I'm not a hater of tofu. Like now I absolutely love tofu. But like that first month, I wanted it to be chicken. So it's like a mindset. It's a mindset, kind of shift. It's tofu. Tofu is tofu. And there's a lot of ways that I, make tofu now where I'm like, oh, I love this. This tofu is awesome.
So thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. So it's just a matter of like, not having that expectation. And same thing what goes with cheese. I should probably touch base on that, because that was another one of the hardest parts of my transition to a plant-based diet was cheese. I was a big fan of cheese before going vegan. That was like my one thing I was concerned about giving up. And cheese is very addicting. It actually has some addicting like qualities to it. And I was like on a search to try to find homemade like vegan cheeses that would taste like cheddar cheese, because cheddar was my favorite. And, I bought cookbooks, right? Like there's cookbooks out there, how to make vegan cheese. And I tried and tried and tried, and just nothing worked out. And that led to a little bit of disappointment. But by the time that I was like, you know what, I'm going to give up trying to make vegan cheese taste like dairy cheese. By that time, I realized I wasn't even really craving the cheese anymore. And, that took me probably like 2 to 3 months to realize that I wasn't even really craving it anymore. Like I was trying to have fun in the kitchen and replicate cheese, but the cravings just kind of disappeared, which was nice. And I think a lot of people experience that after being on a plant-based diet for a little while. They realize the cravings just kind of disappear.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. So it was kind of just like a mental thing to where you were more just focused on trying to, and just like you said on the tofu for chicken, you were focused on trying to make it taste like chicken when it was really like a thing of it, accept it for what it is and make, and get a new palate in terms of flavors, and get a cookbook and make it an adventure to make new things versus trying to make something new taste like something old. Does that sound pretty accurate?
Absolutely. That's perfect.
Oh, that's exciting. And I think that's good advice for the listeners. And I think that's super valuable for people to really consider, as they go on that journey, or as they continue on the one that they're currently on. And I believe you in terms of the, like it just changing to where you're not really actually even craving it anymore. So that's great. And I think that people's bodies adjust, and they will, they'll have some of the same experiences. So all good stuff. What do you think about, so now we've covered, obviously your history, we've covered we've gone a little bit further into the recipes and what the actual nuts and bolts, the good end, I'll call it the ugly. The ugly was you trying to eat tofu every night that you didn't know how to make correctly. I'll throw that one in there. But and then getting your cookbooks and getting in the right mindset so you could move forward. Let's stay in the kitchen just a little longer. So what do you think? I know you're a big kitchen guy. So appliances, other things. I mean, are there any tips that you would give somebody on? I don't know whether it's I don't even know how to ask this question. Whether it's a juicer, whether it's an appliance, like what made your life easier in becoming a vegan in the kitchen, actual equipment wise?
Yeah, so we decided to make some investments and get some appliances that we saw other people that were vegan were using in their kitchen, and try to take their advice. And one little piece of advice I'll give before I answer the question is don't be afraid to make some investments in things like this, because if you make an investment now in order to eat healthier, then you're going to have a whole lot less medical bills down the road when you're older. Just keep that in mind when you're looking at buying like a $500 appliance. It's a lot better than doing that now than having like a heart attack 20 years from now. And so the Vitamix blender has been by far like the most used appliance that we've bought. And there's been a couple that kind of we didn't use as much, but the Vitamix blender is something that our family uses multiple times every single day. And if you can't afford like the brand new ones, they do have refurbished ones. But usually the refurbished ones are just look like some of the older models. But Vitamix blender, absolutely. We do have a juicer as well, which when we have the time to do juicing, that works out very well. And from a nutrition standpoint, like there's just no better way to get a lot of nutrients into your diet than with juicing. And then dehydrating your own like crops if you do have a garden. I think that's something that was beneficial for us. So we have in our old house we had a moringa tree, which is a very nutritious like greens from those trees. The leaves are edible, the flowers are edible. So we would harvest a lot of the leaves and flowers off of that and dehydrate them, turn them into a powder, and we had our own like powder, green juice powder, so to speak. So we would just add that the moringa powder to any smoothies and stuff like that, and it's like a nice little boost of nutrition. So if you have the option to grow some greens in your backyard and dehydrate them, getting a dehydrator would be great.
I need you to stay on that one a little longer. I'm going to assume that some of the people listening are just like me. I don't know what a dehydrator is, Trent.
Yeah, so how like beef jerky or like chicken jerky, those are pretty popular, right? So what they do is they just take like a thin slice of beef and they'll put it in a dehydrator, and what it does is it just basically blows hot air over that piece of meat or vegetable, and it basically like wicks all the moisture out of it, so it'll preserve whatever it is that you're dehydrating by taking all the moisture out. So that's how you make like beef jerky or something like that. But same thing with any vegetables or fruits. You can have dried fruits or dried dried veggies.
So what's one of your favorite?
The thing I dehydrated the most was moringa powder. Now, not everybody can grow a moringa tree in their backyard. I'm fortunate here in Arizona that we can do that. And it's, very nutritious. But even, dehydrating stuff like bananas and having like banana chips, or you could dehydrate like slices of potato for potato chips. You could dehydrate pretty much anything.
Oh, wow. That's really cool. And to the listeners, you're welcome that I asked that question, because I know some of you didn't know what that was. so I don't feel bad. And now I'm thinking, wait a minute, I didn't even have potato chips are my favorite, and I don't eat them because they're fried and bad for me. I indulge at times, but now I'm thinking, good job, Trent. You sold me a Vitamix and you sold me a dehydrator. Amazon.com. Here I come. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I'll include some of these, links to the appliances I use, like in the show notes as well, so it's easier to find. But like those were the three big investments I made when I first went vegan. There are some other things out there, like I've been using an air fryer recently, which is, it's basically like a small oven, but it kind of rotates your food while it's baking it, and I think like that's one of the ways I've been making tofu.
What's your favorite thing? I literally almost bought one of those maybe a week ago, just because they got me on the marketing. I'm going through the grocery store. Explain what it is, because I'll probably buy it this week. So how does it? You said it rotates the food, but like what's the new, like the benefit of it, and what do you use it for? Like what do you put in your air fryer?
Yeah, so we just started using this a couple of months ago, so we haven't experimented too much. But one of the benefits is that it has it's kind of like a pot, in the sense that it's like a nonstick pot. And then at least the one that we have, it like will tilt itself and then rotate. So it's kind of like a rotisserie kind of action going on inside of this air fryer. So we've been, since it's nonstick, you don't have to use as much oil, or you don't have to use oil at all. But I still use a little bit of oil. I'm not afraid of oil like a lot of people are. And so we've just done like seasoned up some tofu, tossed it in there and put it in the air fryer for a little while. So we've been able to have that going while we cook up other stuff on the stove, or cook up rice in our Instapot. That's another one, Instapot. That's awesome. It just makes it a little bit easier, like, because you just kind of toss it in and let it go. But we've also just like diced up a whole bunch of vegetables. Instead of roasting vegetables in the oven, we just loaded up the air fryer with a bunch of vegetables and turned it on for 20 minutes. Gosh,
that is awesome. You just now changed my world, because I've been wanting to eat more vegetables, and specifically roasted vegetables, like roasted garlic and just other things. Just toss them in there and create like a mix. But I hate cleaning the thing, and I hate turning on the oven and all this other stuff. It just takes time. And my thing, I didn't want to spend time in the kitchen. So I can now just dice these things up, throw them in the air fryer, whatever, 20 minutes, or depending on whatever. I'll figure that out. But then when it's done, I have a pretty good size, depending on the size of the air fryer done, that I can just portion out. And now I'm getting, good vegetable intake that also tastes good.
Yeah, exactly. Just cook up some.
You sold me an air fryer too, Trent. I didn't. When I started this interview, I didn't plan on making these investments. I'm out of $1,000 for just doing this interview. Thank you, Trent.
Well, like I said, it'll be an investment for your health. You should do it, Adam.
I'm in. I know, but still, I didn't plan on it. I knew it every time. So let's talk more about your about the plant-based community, diet community, because I want to get into more about what you're doing there. You glanced over it a minute ago, but how exactly are you running the community, and what kind of things can people expect?
Yeah, so keep in mind, if you're listening to this episode, a ways down the road, it might be a little different, but right now this is episode 2 of the Plant-Based Diet Benefits podcast, right? So we're just building our community at this point. But really what I expect this community to be is just a place where people can go to ask questions while they transition to a plant-based diet. I expect there to be a lot of people who are new to this concept. of a plant-based diet and really just want to have their questions answered by somebody who's been on a plant-based diet for a while. That's really what I want it to be. And of course I want people to be able to support each other. It's not like I'm going to be the only one in there answering questions. And then of course I'll hop in and I may do some Facebook lives or post different polls and questions of other people as well during that time. But really just wanted to be a place where people can chat with each other and share recipes, things like that. And not be too judgmental of people who are transitioning. So even if that means, talking to them about having egg whites instead of the whole egg, if that's going to help them transition eventually to a plant-based diet, I don't mind answering questions like that too.
No, that's great. And do you currently offer any products, free or paid?
So right now, we aren't offering anything, but down the road, I am going to be offering health coaching services, and I've also set up a Patreon page as well. So I'll link to that in the show notes, and on there, some of the different gifting levels will allow you to have a monthly Q&A with me to answer questions live in a group setting. Or if you wanted to have one-on-one sessions with me, each month, for example, then you can sign up for that there.
That's great. And where can people go to learn more about you? What's the website and all the contact stuff?
Yeah, so it's www.plantbaseddietbenefits.com is the website, and that's where you'll see all the show notes for the podcast. And then, of course, on Instagram, Plant-Based Diet Benefits, and on Facebook, the group community is Plant-Based Diet Benefits Community. So any of those three places are probably the best to find me.
That's awesome. Well, I can tell you, I definitely am going to continue to follow. I love to see all the things you do, and I can't wait till we get that Trent Lindsey cookbook or something else and products out there, because I know how much time and effort, and I know when you do things, they're done right. So I'm just excited to see where this thing goes for you, and I'm excited to follow the journey. So thank you for having me on.
I appreciate it, Adam. Thank you for being a part of the show and kind of reversing roles a little bit with me and having me be on the spot, so to speak, answering some of these questions. And I appreciate your time. Hey friends, I hope you've enjoyed listening to episode 2 of the Plant-Based Diet Benefits podcast. Please take a time to visit our show notes at www.plantbaseddietbenefits.com/2. Again, that's www.plantbaseddietbenefits.com/2. For episode 2, and on that show notes page, you can choose to subscribe to our podcast, where you can get some email updates as well, and view our resources page to see what appliances I recommend to help you go plant-based and reach your goals on a plant-based diet. Thank you very much for your time today, guys. I look forward to having you be a part of our community. So please check out our community as well. It's www.plantbaseddietbenefits.com/community. There you'll be directed to our Facebook group to join and ask as many questions as you'd like of our community. And I'd be more than happy to help you out there as well. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to chatting with you on the next episode.